This is the Shard Villa, haunted by Columbus Smith. He had a tragic life, including the death of his young son. They remain here but do not rest.
Yes, and if you're scared of ghosts or anything like that, this video is not for you. So my mom got all 3 of our kids a betta fish for Christmas. This is me taking the picture of the betta fish, and this is obviously the reflection from it. And if you can't see it, here you go. And that's behind me and the reflection. And people have tried to say that I photoshopped that in there. There's no Photoshop there whatsoever.
You know that saying, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you do it? Well, my TikTok followers told me to go to the Amityville horror house where 6 people were murdered in 1974, and I did. Supposedly the house was renovated to not look like itself, but I think it's a pretty bad disguise.
I am a tour guide. This morning, when I was giving a tour, I noticed a sinkhole had opened up over a crypt. Decided to stick my phone down the hole to get a look.
Three scary places. In London, Bethnal Green Tube Station, almost 200 people were killed in the station during the Second World War in the Blitz. Staff complain about hearing screaming and crying when the platforms are empty. The 10 Bells Spitalfields. Many of Jack the Ripper's victims were regulars at this pub, and some were last seen here before they were murdered, and is still haunted today by the ghost of the mutilated Annie Chapman. Highgate Cemetery has over 53,000 graves, including those of Karl Marx, George Eliot and George Michael. There are stories of a Highgate vampire. Supposedly the spirit of a Romanian nobleman who practiced black magic still haunts the grounds.
The Vista Hospital was opened in 1904 in the East LA neighborhood of Boyle Heights. For many years, it was an excellent medical facility, but by the 1980s, it was quite the opposite. Due to almost no staffing, no money, and seeing all sorts of violent crime patients, the facility would often turn away ambulances. Many deaths occurred here due to patient mismanagement, and the hospital officially shut down in 1991. Since its closing, many have claimed to experience paranormal activity in the building. Some claim to see the spirit of a little girl in what used to be the operating room. Others have seen the spirit of a former orderly and a woman that paces on the 3rd floor. For many years, it was used as a set for horror films and is now a senior living facility.
Creepy Reddit posts, part 1. This post came from the Reddit user RedWantsBlue80, and it details how they were using one of those sleep apps that records sounds at night while you're asleep. One morning they woke up and were going through the recordings when they came across one that made the hairs on their neck stand up. They said in it you can hear some clicks that start to get louder over the course of the recording. Eventually you can hear me say, "What are you doing?" And immediately after there's a deep voice that says, "Nothing." The clicks become very loud at that point, and at the very end of the recording you hear the same voice say, "That's them."
What are you doing? Okay.
The poster made it very clear that this responding voice was not a voice they could emulate themselves, which left them wondering who was in their room responding to them that night. Make sure you guys like and subscribe for more.
Just today, over 750 children were found buried in a mass grave outside of a school in Canada. Boarding schools sponsored by the state and run by churches like this one were built all over Canada. And Indigenous children were separated from their families and sent to live here full-time in order to assimilate them into Canadian culture. But the conditions at these schools were oftentimes terrible. A lot of these buildings didn't have heating and cooling, they were unsanitary, they were built very poorly. And a lot of these young children suffered physical and verbal abuse at the hands of the people that ran these institutions. I found an article from 2008 about this in a Canadian newspaper. And in the article, they talk about the people that were trying to raise awareness about these graves being on the properties was bothering people from the churches because they refused to acknowledge that these kids were buried there. But now Canada seems to be waking up. In the last month, there have been many remains unearthed at these schools. And it's estimated that somewhere between 3,000 to 30,000 kids died in these boarding schools. Hopefully though, with the discovery of these graves, healing can begin.
You guys have asked me if there's anywhere I believe is truly haunted. The Lalaurie Mansion, New Orleans is one of those places. I refuse to even walk near it. If you've watched Coven, you're probably familiar with this, but I want to get into the dark history of this home. In the early 1800s, Madame Lalaurie, Dr. Lalaurie, and Marie's 2 daughters moved into this mansion. They were very wealthy. At the time, it was still legal to own slaves. However, in New Orleans, you were not allowed to physically harm your slaves. Rumors flew that the Lalauries mistreated their slaves, but there was no concrete proof of this until April 10th, 1834. A fire broke out at the Lalaurie mansion, and this window that's boarded up, that was supposedly the attic. People rushed into the home, and they heard screams coming from the attic. When they busted down the door, what they saw was just absolutely atrocious. People were chained up in the attic, tortured in horrible ways that I'm not going to go into detail about. And this torture was done at the hands of the Lalauries. The people freed as many of the slaves from the attic as they could and formed a mob to go after the Lalauries. And unfortunately, they escaped. A lot of people think that Marie acted alone, but honestly, I believe her husband was involved too. I'm going to go into that more in part 2.
The house in Burrillville, Rhode Island is said to be so haunted it's featured in The Conjuring. The house dates back to 1736 and the Perron family moved in 1970. Not long after moving in, they began seeing pictures taken off the wall and the broom moving by itself. The children began seeing and interacting with spirits and their beds would shake at night. They began smelling a terrible rotting stench and felt a presence in the basement. Soon, Ed and Lorraine Warren were called to help. Lorraine led a seance that allegedly made the spirit leave the house, and the Perron family left shortly after. The house is still inhabited, and it is said that paranormal things are still going on.
Spooky places to visit in America, part 2. First is the St. Augustine Lighthouse in Florida. There's multiple tragedies that happen around here, but one of them was that 3 children drowned, and people say they can still hear the kids when they're around here. Second is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia. There was 130 years of brutality here, including phlebotomies and electroshock therapy. It's creepy as fuck. Third is the Lizzie Borden Bread and Breakfast. It is thought that Lizzie killed her parents, and you can actually sleep in the room where the mom died. You couldn't pay me to stay here. And last, but certainly not least, is the Ohio State Reformatory, also known as the Shawshank Prison. Multiple brutalities and stuff happen here, but people say you can still hear.
So I work in real estate on a team with my family, and my brother was showing a house yesterday in Tampa. The clients asked if he could show them what was in there. So with no hesitation, he gets his $1 moving right on down.
Be careful.
I was so creeped out watching this. Just wait. WTF, no thank you, no frickin' frackle thank you. Why is there a chair? And I have so many questions.
Roosevelt Hotel, right in the heart of Hollywood Boulevard, is LA's longest operating hotel, opening in 1927. It's been visited by numerous celebrities throughout the decades. It hosted the first ever Academy Awards in its Blossom Ballroom in 1929. Marilyn Monroe loved the hotel, staying there for 2 years as her career took off. It's also one of the most haunted hotels in Hollywood. It's been reported that Marilyn Monroe haunts suite number 1200, where she's appeared to guests staying in the room. An employee dusting the mirror saw Marilyn's reflection looking back. The mirror has since been moved to a mezzanine hallway just off the hotel lobby. Several guests have reported seeing Marilyn in the reflection of the mirror. Actor Montgomery Clift is still active in suite number 928. Clift is known for brushing up against people and has been heard playing his trumpet. Another recurring spirit is that of 5-year-old Caroline, who's always looking for her mother. 2 unidentified mischievous spirits haunt the Blossom Ballroom, purposely making loud footsteps and locking people out of the rooms. Security once saw a person swimming in the pool through the cameras while it was closed. When one of them went to check, the guard could still see the apparition swimming, but the guard at the pool couldn't see anything at all. Let me know if you've been here.
This is Batboy. In June of 1992, the publication Weekly World News published this article titled Batchild Found in Cave, where they talk about scientists who entered the notorious Hellhole Cave and discovered this young man who they nicknamed Batboy. This newspaper, the Weekly World News, obviously ran a bunch of fake articles, but it was published and found in supermarkets across the United States and the world, so Batboy became an instant phenomenon. And in the years after Batboy was discovered, it was reported that he went on a lot of weird adventures. Apparently, he went over to Iraq, he fought there, he was a secret agent, he drank human blood through crazy straws, he lived a very wild life. And even though the Weekly World News stopped publishing articles in 2007, Batboy lives on. If you want to hear more creepy, crazy stories, go follow my YouTube channel, The Paranormal Files, or follow me here on TikTok for ghost content, true crime content, All the above. Oh, and listen to my podcast, Murder in America, which I co-host with my fiance. Links in my bio.